Hey everyone, and welcome to Series 2, Episode 1 of Just V Show Chat with me, Ben Corbett. We're delighted to be back monthly with 2 interviews and a cook-along every episode. On today's show, we welcome urban farmer Jack Hodgson from Jack's Patch to see what's going on at the farm right now, and talk to vegan travel blogger Kathi from WatchMeSee. Then we'll round things off with a cook-along as we welcome Romy London, cooking for you live. So let's get straight into it and invite our first guest into the studio, Jack Hodgson.
Yo, how you doing?
How's it going,
Ben?
man? Good to see you.
Yeah, well, I'm well, very well. Very tan, got farmer's tan this time of year. So.
You would have after the last few months.
Yeah, mate.
Before we get into it, though, so for people that don't know your work or didn't see the episode you were on last time, could you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Jack, owner of Jack's Patch. I'm an urban farmer, and I run a quarter-acre market garden on the border of East London, Essex. So if you can hear the road in the background, we're within the M25. So yeah, farming the city pretty much. So I run off 2 principles: no dig and permaculture, and they're just more holistic ways of working with the land instead of against it. And we can actually yield more food by doing these practices that are slightly easier, but when you work with the land, it gives back to you because you're giving back to it. So I just think it's a nice way of storing carbon back into the soil, working the land, eating good organic food, and it's accessible to everyone and anyone. And I try and show that through workshops and teachings on social media.
That sounds really cool, really cool. I mean, so I guess we've had all the sun, and now I think the last sort of 48 hours has been absolute deluge of rain. How is the farm standing up to the torrential rain over the last couple of days?
To be honest, I ain't had a drop. It's
Have
really
you not?
strange. No, it's really strange. I mean, it's like wanting to rain, but I've not had a drop here. I feel sometimes just being in Essex, we get a microclimate. We don't get the weather it says is around us. But I know it's coming within this next week. 100% it's going to rain. But we've had all this heat. Once all that rain comes, that moisture goes back in the ground. And then if we finish off August with another hot batch of weather, I think it's going to flurry even more. I mean, I'm getting, as you can see, it's an absolute jungle behind me in the polytunnel. I mean, some of these tomato plants are 8 to 9 foot tall. So it's been a great summer because we've had on the outside we've had a mixture of sun and rain. We've had quite a lot of rain for a summer, so it's been good. It's had good and bad points, but yeah, mainly good.
So it was interesting to come and see you last time when we did the first time when you came on, because you could tell us what was going on at that moment, and we were talking about spring going into the summer. So now we're sort of mid to getting towards the back part of the summer now, I guess. So what stage is the farm at now? What should people be doing? What are you doing right now? Is this the time where we sort of see the fruits of our labor, no pun intended, or so what's going on at the moment?
So now you should be full-time abundance. So if you took it upon yourself to start growing this year back in spring, this is the time where, as you say, fruits of your labour, this is where it all comes to fruition. Like, I'm getting abundance of tomatoes, courgettes, I've got coming out my ears, I've got cucumbers. Everything really is hitting its peak. And also your veg that you planted in spring for winter is starting to look a lot more mature. But as well as the abundance, as I learned last year, I got a bit too excited during this time of year. You're just harvesting, and you stop sowing. So now is actually the perfect time. August is a time where you start sowing seeds for autumn and winter because to keep that abundance flowing. So as I said, last year I got too excited. Once autumn come around, once winter come around, it got a bit scarce. Because I was enjoying summer so much that I forgot that I need to be continuously sowing. So same with you guys, if you're growing at home, you're obviously going to have stuff coming out of the ground now, but it's also, you should be thinking of that continual harvest and put stuff back in the ground. So I'm going to give you a little list and we'll talk through it slow. So get a pen and paper.
Nice.
So stuff you can sow now. Some stuff will be ready in a month because we're going to get that summer heat to let it grow quick. So spinach, a lot of leafy greens right now. So spinach, rocket, pak choy, bok choy, cabbage for winter. You can do lettuce now as well. That will be quick. Spring onion, cauliflower, broccoli. This stuff will grow now, but then will mature in autumn, and then you'll be ready for either winter or spring next year. So purple sprouting broccoli is another one. Also, late batch of like leeks. You can do bulb fennel. You can still do basil. There's still herbs. There's still quite a lot. Chard is one. I'm just looking out the window of the polytunnel and just seeing exactly what else I'm putting in the ground. I mean, now you should be getting like summer squash coming through. What else have I got going in? Radish, nice easy one, 30 days to harvest. These are the sort of things that you should be looking at now, ready, that you will be having in autumn, winter, and then obviously you should have been planted squash and kale, like maybe in July, and now that sort of stuff will be slowly maturing. But this is the sort of stuff that people kind of forget, but you can continuously harvest it, and then, even I've just planted potatoes, and potatoes will be ready back into September, October, and then before the first frost, and then they're ready for Christmas. Pull them out of the ground, you store them, and you've got Christmas potatoes. So it's just trying to get people don't think about it, but it's a great question you asked there, Ben, because there's a lot of people that forget about sowing now for autumn, winter. So I've got my eye heavily on it because I missed the boat last year.
Awesome. That sounds really cool, because you don't want to be, if you're making a sort of commitment to trying to grow more stuff at home, you don't want to be doing that and only getting stuff for sort of 3 months a year, if that's
Exactly.
not necessary. Do you notice have you noticed that there's been a particularly big yield this year? Do you get certain years where you get more, and do you think that's to do with the weather? What I've noticed with the plum tree in my garden is I think every third year I get so many that I just don't know what to do with them. I have to freeze some and stuff like that. I don't know whether that's about the conditions, or there's certain plants and trees that only sort of yield like every other year, something like that. Have you noticed that?
So going back to your plum tree, there's one over the back. There's a little bit of an orchard here that was like here before I came, and only 1/4, like it's like the southwest part of the plant is fine. The rest has got no dams and plums on it, and I think because we had a bit of a chill in May where it was blossoming, and that chill through the wind coming from the north kind of affected most of the tree, but the back southwest end, wherever the wind wasn't blowing, seemed to like escape it. But it's just like this one sliver where there's like loads of fruit, and the rest of the tree is completely bare. So it does matter if we have like frost in spring, which we did get, like a late frost in May, and that affected like my potatoes and things like that. So I was always constantly covering up until June. So it's like an anomaly in the weather where we're probably getting a later frost than we should have done. And also it was hotter in Easter, so stuff kind of comes out, even the wildlife starts to come out, and then there's a frost at night in May, and it does like upset the balance. So that definitely affected me this year. And also I planted a new part of the garden, and I had like quite dry manure as I was getting the bed prepped, and then we had a really, really hot batch of weather, and any plant that went into dry manure, and then it was dry anyway, so it needed to be flooded, but that stressed the plants out, so I had affected growth. And I think a lot of people growing this year had the same kind of issue. It wasn't their fault necessarily, it's just we had a really hot batch when seedlings need to be kind of moist. And I think a lot of people saw an effect of that, especially if they didn't have great quality compost.
Okay.
And it's started to recover now, but it's definitely been affected by that.
Okay. And what would you say is your most successful thing this year? Like your most successful yield, do you think? The tomatoes?
Yeah. They're growing like a weed. They're growing in here, and then obviously when I cleared the polytunnel last year, all the tomato plants went onto the compost heap. Then the seeds didn't break down because they're quite hardy, and then I've spread that all over the farm, and I'm finding tomato plants just cropping up everywhere. But I'm not complaining. I'll kind of, if it's grown quite well, there'll be tomato, and then there'll be carrots underneath it. I've just kind of left it because as I'm doing this as a market garden, they're a high profitability crop, but everyone loves organic tomatoes. Like the flavor difference is insane to shop bought. So yeah, it's one crop that everyone loves, but for me it's the most prolific. But one thing I've grown this year that everyone's loving, I've grown pink celery.
Nice.
I tried to grow weird and wonderful things as well as just growing the bog standard stuff. So I've got these tomatoes called Brad's Atomic Grape, and these guys are looking pretty strange. They're like a grape looking, but they're multicolored.
Weird. Okay.
Chocolate peppers. The pink celery, as I said, is just like a nice hot pink, but it sells because, I mean, girls love pink, and they like, if they're doing a celery juice cleanse or something, it's just like, it's a win-win. Chocolate tomatoes, a nice brown tomato, purple kale. I just try and grow weird and wonderful stuff that's kind of you're not going to see in the supermarket, so it kind of has that kind of like aesthetic look. They're like, if I do a box for people, it's like multicolored rather than just green or whatever.
Okay, cool. And we may have sort of gone into that a little bit there, but has there been anything that's really sort of surprised you this year? Something that went a lot better or a lot worse than you were expecting?
I'm going to explain a lot worse because there's stuff that's gone are better, as I said, about the tomatoes. But for example, where I had brought that manure in, there's been a bit of an issue with like a herbicide getting in the system, and a lot of people are seeing growth issues with a few things. I think they've either legalized it again, or farmers are misusing this chemical.
Okay.
So it's kind of pushing the narrative to use more plant manures like mushroom compost instead of using like a horse manure that could potentially be affected. But I got a bit of soil tested because the potatoes had like this curling effect, which is the poisoning from this herbicide, but affected the plants minimally, but in terms of the yield minimally, but the actual plant looked sick, so I didn't get as many potatoes as I should have done. So I saw that as a bit of a loss. And also as well, I've noticed wherever you do veggie beds near trees, the roots rob the water and the nutrients. So it's quite interesting. You can have a food forest and grow food that type of way, but I feel like it has to be native. The plant you plant near the tree has to be almost native to that area, that tree, which makes a lot of sense. And I've noticed I planted like sunflowers kind of near tree roots. They're like overshadowing the garden, and they should be 8 foot tall. These sunflowers, they're called Sunzilla, and they're like 1.5 foot tall.
Amazing.
And so some of the plants around there have been a little bit stressed as well, so they've gone to seed quicker. So it's just showing that the roots of the tree is like sucking up the nutrients and the water a bit quicker.
Okay.
So I'm just going to raise the soil there next year. But it's something I've learned. I think you should always be learning. In a garden, you're always learning. But for me, it's a good thing because it's something that's happened that I won't make that mistake again. But in terms of good stuff, I mean, the garden's been in its second year. Everything's quite abundant anyway. But I've been very impressed. I've planted a lot more beneficial flowers in the garden, so I've seen a lot more wildlife come back, and that's kind of been a beautiful thing. It looks more vibrant and more alive. So it's going into that permaculture. So just kind of doubled up on wildflower.
Okay, so cool. I mean, so do you want to, like last time? I know you gave us a quick whistle stop tour. Are you in a position to just give us a really quick look around before we go?
Sure. I'm good. Can I turn the camera around? Is it the camera button at the bottom?
Yeah.
Does that turn it around or just turn me off?
That just turns you off.
Trying to figure out. I'll just flip it around.
Yeah, so, man, just give us a really quick look around, and we'll just to give a little bit of context to what you're telling us about where it is and how you guys work.
So outside the polytunnel, we've got like courgettes here, yellow courgettes coming up to carrots, radish, Brussels sprouts, leeks, these cute cucumbers all there. This is what I mean by the flowers. It's more vibrant, but we've got some enormous beetroot going on. Yeah, so it's like all of this area as well here, Ben.
Very cool.
And then
Very
there's also
cool.
an area over the back as well. But
Awesome.
How it's kind of played out since people may have last seen it, because it's looking way more abundant and
really cool. Really cool. Right. Well, I think we're losing you a little bit now, but thanks so much for coming on today and showing us around, man. And it's just it's so nice to see how it's developing, and we'd love to see you're talking about you're sowing some stuff now for autumn. Be lovely to have you come by in the autumn, and we can see that stuff coming out and the yield from that. That would be wicked.
Yeah, anytime, Ben. All right, good luck to
Where can people find you?
Well.
Where can people they want to see more about it?
So at Jax_patch on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, I'm on YouTube as well, but mainly Instagram.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and www.jaxpatch.co.uk for any more info as well. But anyone can get in touch, and if you're in London, there's volunteer days as well.
Awesome. All right, cheers for that, Jack.
All right,
have a great weekend, mate, and we'll see you again.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we were going to pop across to Kathi at this point to talk about some vegan travel, but she's having a little bit of technical issues, so we're going to move things around a little bit, and we're going to jump to our cook-along with Romy. And hopefully we'll get Kathi back at the end and we can still have our chat. So I'm going to invite to the studio now, good friend of the show, Romy London.
Hey,
how
Ben,
you doing, mate?
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm good. Just listening to Jack just really made me realize maybe I should look after my herbs that are sitting on the windowsill. So
that's what
whilst
he's here
I've been
for.
listening, I've been picking all of the dead leaves off of them.
That's so cool. So what are you going to be cooking for us today?
Yeah, today I'm going to show you how to make some vegan burger buns, because on the one hand, I find vegan burger buns are always something a little bit difficult to come by, because mostly they're usually brioche buns and they use either milk or egg in them. So it's difficult to find some vegan ones. And I find that if I manage to find some vegan ones in the shop, they usually have a lot of preservatives and whatnot in there. But if I find some, they're usually way too big for the vegan burgers, because the vegan burgers are usually a quarter pounder size, whereas those burger buns just appear to be for massive burgers, and then you always end up with more bread than burger. So
okay, cool.
I started making my own, and I'm using a technique there, which actually comes from Japanese cooking. And in Japanese cooking, they make a lot of sweet bakes, which are very similar to brioche, but they don't use egg in it. And obviously milk you can just very easily replace. So I don't know if I pronounce it right, but in Japanese it's called tangzong. Cool. I might be not pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, that's so cool. I've popped it up on the screen. I've popped up the ingredients, but I'll do that again at the end for everyone. But just give them an idea of what you're going to be using, and then I'll remind everyone at the end.
I've just posted this on the blog as well, so that after the show, if anybody wants to save this recipe or bookmark it or get back to it at another time, they can always find it on the blog.
And before I hand over to you, Romy, I'm just going to say, anyone that's waiting to see Kathi, she has made it into the studio, don't worry. So we will come to her after the cook-along. So I'm going to hand over to you, Romy, and stick you on full screen.
Okay, perfect. So in order to make the burger buns, you just need a couple of simple ingredients. On the one hand, is plain flour. Who would have thought? We're using some yeast in it as well, and a little bit of sugar. You need the sugar to activate the yeast properly. We're adding a little bit of salt in there as well, just to kind of balance the sweetness from the sugar so that they don't turn into sweet burger buns. I mean, you do you. But and then we have a couple of liquids, which is oil and milk. So I used soy milk on this occasion. And then what I've done here is I've prepared all of my dry ingredients. So I've put in here the salt, the flour, the yeast, and the sugar. And I'm just combining this just to have all of my dry ingredients in the same place. And then in a separate jug, I've just got this down here in my oven, I've put the liquids in here. So this is the soy milk, and I put the oil in there as well because it's just easier to pour in all together. They kind of need to be at room temperature. I, of course, forgot to put my milk out of the fridge in time, so I've just left it in the oven. I've just put it at like a low degree and then turned the oven off. So this is usually what I do. Let me turn you around a little bit more so that you can actually see what I'm going to be doing down here. Let me tilt you a little bit. So in order to create this tanzong, I'm basically making a paste. So in the ingredients on the recipe, I've written up how much flour and milk you need for the tanzong and then how much you need for the rest. So it's like 2 separate parts, basically. The tanzong is basically, I'm creating a paste from a little bit of flour and a little bit of milk. So I'm just going to add in the milk over here, and you need to continuously stir this to kind of combine the flour and the milk. And then you're basically just leaving this over like a low to medium heat until it starts to thicken up. Just try not to get any clumps in there. And this little secret basically is what's going to make the burger buns like really, really fluffy. And it's super simple because it's literally just soy milk or whatever other milk you want to use. You can use almond or oat milk as well, works just as fine. And a little bit of flour. So instead of combining all of the ingredients as I would do with other bakes, I basically just took a part of the flour and a part of the milk and create this paste. And that's basically the secret to creating like super fluffy vegan bakes. I'm just going to let this simmer here for a little bit until it begins to thicken up. Just need to stay like really close by. Just make sure you don't burn anything or that it doesn't start spitting at you. Let me just make sure that in the meantime I'm also combining this properly so I don't have any like patches of sugar or patches of yeast in there. And I always use, when I combine anything that has yeast in it, I always just use any wooden spoons and my hands. I do bake regularly, but I actually don't own a mixer. I do everything by hand. So I can kind of tell it's starting to thicken up a little bit at the bottom already now. It's probably going to be another 2 or 3 minutes. Just making sure we're not burning anything, not getting any lumps. So I think we've got this well combined as well. I'm just going to add in, I'm just going to make a little well in the middle. I'm just going to add in my liquid ingredients here already, the oil and the milk. This can go in there already. And then the tanzong is going to go in there as well. Yeah, now it's starting to thicken up a little bit more. I don't know if you can see this here, just trying to get you a little bit closer. I have to continuously stir now because it's starting to become a paste. So just really wait until it becomes like really thick and gluey. So you can kind of tell how quickly it suddenly happens. It's like you're waiting for a couple of minutes and then all of a sudden you're done and you're ready. I can actually turn this off now. Just make sure everything is combined. No big lumps in there. Just quickly grab a spoon and then we're going to pop that over into the other mix. Just grabbing a spoon. All right. And then once we've got that in there, we can then start combining all of the ingredients together. With the liquids that you're using in this recipe, it's like very similar to other yeast recipes. You just need to make sure that the liquids are at like a room temperature, maybe slightly warmer than room temperature. They shouldn't be coming straight from the fridge because then they can't activate your yeast. And at the same time also they shouldn't be too hot because otherwise they can kill off the yeast and then your bake is not going to work out. Also make sure that your yeast is actually in date. I've made this mistake before of finding some yeast in the back of the cupboard and thinking like, oh yeah, that'll do. No, it won't. So if your burger buns are not rising properly or they become too hard and too tough, then it's probably that your yeast may have been out of date. So just always make sure to look after that. I'm soon going to switch over to kneading this on the top here. So as soon as it becomes too difficult to do it with a spoon, just flour the surface a little bit. And then you can just tip this out onto the surface. And then you just want to be kneading this with your hands for a couple of minutes until you get like a really smooth dough ball, basically. So I'm always just kind of like pushing it and then folding in the sides. That's like the easiest way to do this without making a massive mess. It's already really nice and soft. What we'll be doing with this recipe, obviously I'm not going to show you the entire rest of the recipe. Once you've got your dough ball really nice and round and shiny, you're going to place this back into the bowl. First grease the bowl a little bit so that it doesn't get stuck in the bowl afterwards. And then you need to cover this and let this rise for like an hour, and it'll probably more than double in size within that time. So you're going to end up with like a lot of dough. You want to cover this so that no air can actually get to it. So the best thing to do is to either cover it with a wet towel, or you can also use, like I have these reusable like plastic wraps that can go over my bowls, so that I always use those. You can tell it's already coming nicely together. So we're letting that rise for an hour afterwards, and once the hour elapses, you basically just take the towel or the covering off, and then you just push out the air with your hand or like the fist. You just push it down, and then you can take out the dough and divide it into your burger buns. Now, normally I get about 8 to 10 burger buns out of one recipe. So obviously it depends on how big you want your burger buns to be, but this is the nice thing about this recipe. You can kind of adjust this to whatever burgers you're using and how big they are. Just make sure that when you're forming your burger buns, you're making them a little bit smaller than what you need, because once we've shaped the burger buns, we're letting them rise for another hour. And then when they are risen, then you can bake them. And I think my dough ball is coming together nicely. So you can see I always press it and then push in from the outside. Pressing, pushing in from the outside. And it's becoming like a really nice, smooth ball this way. And I think I'm almost ready to let it rise. So yeah, we're letting it rise twice. Once the dough ball as it is, and then once again when we've shaped the burger buns. You just place them onto a baking tray, or 2 or 3. Space them out nicely because we're going to let them rise for another hour. So you need to make sure that they don't necessarily touch each other whilst they're on the baking tray. And yeah, after the second rise, you can then pop them in the oven about 180 degrees for 10 minutes, preheated of course. And then after those 10 minutes, you can brush them with, it's kind of like a vegan egg wash. And I usually use a mix of soy milk and maple syrup. So I use 1 part maple syrup, 3 parts soy milk, or whatever other milk you want to use. And then you can brush that on the top and then sprinkle anything that you want on the top onto your burger buns, such as sesame seeds. I love sesame seeds, so I always use those. Poppy seeds, so you can also leave them blank, of course, but definitely add the egg wash, because that's what's going to make them like really nice and golden afterwards. And these will turn out like really, really fluffy. When they come out the oven, they are very browned on the top, but when you touch them, you see like how soft they actually are. So I've got my big dough ball here now. So this is what it's supposed to look like. Just need to grease the bowl a little bit. Let me just get some oil from here to do that. And then we can place this inside and let it rise. And yeah, this is basically the first step of the recipe, and like the main step of the recipe. The rest is literally just rising time and letting it, just get rid of the excess, letting it sit and then bake in the end. But it's already turned out like super, super fluffy, and in the next hour it's just gonna increase in size and become really, really fluffy. And yeah, you can also freeze these burger buns. I've frozen them before after baking, which can totally be done. And when you defrost them, they're really nice and soft still, but they kind of shrivel up a little bit in size, so they kind of lose a little bit of the air that they have in them when they're first baked. And if you want to make this dough in advance and then freeze the dough so that you're ready to make your burger buns, basically, you can, after the first rise, you could just divide it into your burger bun sizes and then pack them in foil and then freeze them in your freezer. And then they should normally last like at least 3 months. I mean, I've never gotten to the limit of where they didn't work out anymore. So yeah, the best time to freeze is after the first rise. And when you defrost them, just pop them in your fridge, wait until they're defrosted, give them a little bit of a knead again, shape them nicely, let them sit for an hour, and then you can pop them in the oven. And yeah, and this will make some really nice burger buns. Hopefully we're gonna have some burgers this weekend. Let me move you up again so I can actually see.
That looks amazing. Thank you so much. And we've got some pictures here of the finished item, haven't we?
Yeah, just so you can see like how fluffy they actually turn out.
Yeah, they look really nice.
Yeah, and I like making my own just because it's difficult to get by vegan ones. And then if you find vegan ones, they're usually not the right size. So I've literally come to this point. I mean, I photograph burgers regularly, and I've come to the point where I just make them myself every time. So.
And so this burger here that you've photographed, what's in this?
It's kind of like a Tex-Mex style burger. So I've used some vegan burgers from Oomph, 2 patties actually. Put some vegan cheese from Follow Your Heart on it. I made a coleslaw that I put on it alongside with some guacamole and then a salsa on top. I have to admit, I didn't manage to eat it in this one piece.
I was going to say.
It looked great. It looked great for the photos, but I needed to actually take it apart into 2 and then eat it like that because
it looked amazing.
I was not happening.
Imagine you dislocating your jaw trying to eat that.
Yeah, surely.
Do you want to just take us through the ingredients one more time? That's all right.
Yeah, sure. So we've got some flour that we need. It's on my recipe I put for the tangzong the ingredients separately. So it's 40 grams of flour with 180 milliliters of milk. And then for the rest of the flour, you combine in a bowl 420 grams of flour, 25 grams of sugar, 2 sachets of dry active yeast, or if you, like I have my yeast in bulk, for example, so I just measure out 14 grams. Cool. The sachets are usually 7. And then just the oil, I think it's 40 milliliters if I remember correctly, and 160 milliliters of milk, and you just combine that together, and that's pretty much all you need, so it's not very complicated.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming and showing us that today.
Thanks
really
for having
cool.
me.
I imagine everyone's going to be eating burgers. Everyone's going to be having burgers this weekend.
Well, it's National Burger Day this month on the 27th.
Oh, is it?
So I thought this was a good recipe to share. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll share it again on that day. I'll mark that in my diary.
Awesome. All
right. No worries. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, sure. I'll see you soon, Ben.
Cheers, Romy. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. So I'll drop Romy out, and now we have, without further delay, into the studio. Kathi, we've managed to get you here. I'm so happy that you're here.
Sorry, yeah, the irony of someone who works in social media and digital media who can't click the right link.
It doesn't matter. You're here, and that's all that matters at this point, right?
Yeah.
So let's just dive straight in. So if people don't know your work online, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kathi. I run a variety of websites, but my main one is my travel blog about Scotland, which is called WatchMeSee, so with SEE. And I also run a website called Glasgow Vegan Guide, which is all about vegan food in Glasgow, restaurants with vegan options and menus, and yeah, other vegan businesses in the city as well.
Amazing. That sounds so cool. I think I've got a picture of your thing to share up here. So let me just pop that up so people can see WatchMeSee, which is how I came to know you, was through seeing this, your vegan travel blog.
It really is my main website. So I talk mostly about Scotland, or only about Scotland really, and the vegan kind of comes in because I'm vegan. I love to talk about vegan restaurants and vegan options in Scotland and all over the country, really, because it's one of those things. Everyone thinks, oh, in the cities it's easy, but in the countryside it isn't. And that's really not true for Scotland. So I love talking about that in all of my travel guides as well, and just making it obvious that there is always the option.
That's cool. That's cool. Because you also do the Glasgow vegan guide as well, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And that's really more specifically about the city. Obviously, visitors can come on it as well, but it's really for locals and also for local businesses to have a platform where, you know, I have a directory, or I try to keep as complete a directory as I can of vegan and vegan-friendly businesses in town. So everything beyond restaurants, so catering businesses, nail salons, hairdressers, and so on. But also restaurants with a decent vegan offering, whether they're fully vegan or not. I'm quite open to that. But restaurants with a decent vegan offering is very important, that you know, people know where they can go and where they feel like they're being welcomed and looked after properly.
And I think that we run Just V Show in Glasgow, and I don't think I realised quite how good the sort of vegan scene was in Glasgow, and how vibrant it is, and how many places there are to visit. And I think, you know, particularly now where lots of people maybe had plans to go abroad and stuff like that, and I know there's talk of the English not crossing the border for a little while and stuff like that. But while we are allowed, while Hadrian's Wall isn't being rebuilt properly, I think this is a good opportunity for people to maybe, you know, visit Glasgow and check out all the vegan stuff now that restaurants are starting to reopen.
Absolutely. And, you know, Glasgow has a great food scene regardless of what you eat. But what I love about the vegan food scene particularly is that you get vegan food from all over the world. You can try different kinds of cuisines, and they're still vegan friendly, and there's restaurants that do all sorts of, you know, vegan options. So you can travel around the world if you come to Glasgow and eat the vegan food.
That sounds amazing. Everything except the weather. So it's
it's almost sunny today.
So I guess it's quite a tricky time to be talking about travel. Did it hit you quite hard when you had to stay in for a long time, or did you find it an opportunity to explore a little more locally in more remote places?
Well, the good thing is that because I mostly travel in Scotland, or write about travel in Scotland, it wasn't like, you know, I didn't have big international trips planned that had to be called off or cancelled. I did have trips planned to Ireland that I had to cancel, and also to go back home to visit my family. So that was all a bit of a shame, you know, and it felt like a big part of what I enjoyed doing was all of a sudden not possible. But actually what was even harder was the fact that even within Scotland, we couldn't travel to the mountains and to the seaside. And I love hiking, I love being outdoors, and not being able to actually get outdoors and properly out of the city was quite hard. But Glasgow is a very green city. There's lots of parks and country parks in and kind of around the city. So within the 5 mile kind of radius, that was the rule for Scotland for the majority of the lockdown. You could still get to nice natural places. So it wasn't, you know, and I discovered lots of parks that I did not know about. And I think I really found a new appreciation for Glasgow as well as a place to live in.
That's really cool. And I guess, you know, now that we're at the other side of the sort of strict lockdown section, and people are really really looking at domestic travel is the thing now. You know, it's difficult to get anywhere booked in the UK at the moment because everyone's traveling around the UK and stuff like that. I guess now's the real good time for people to be checking out your stuff and learning a little bit more about Scotland and where they can go without having to get on a plane.
And I think one thing that I find what I love about Scotland is that you can do so many things that you think you have to go abroad for. And it can be quite surprising of all the things you can try here, whether it's specific outdoor activities that, you know, you might know from abroad, but you can actually try here, or the stunning beaches that we have here. As I said earlier, like the different kinds of cuisines and the food you get in Scotland, and particularly in Glasgow, you know, you don't have to go abroad to be a bit adventurous. And then, of course, there's the language. People love going abroad for the language barrier, just come up here, you know.
Yeah,
You got
amazing.
well.
That sounds perfect. Now, I did want to ask you, and this might seem a bit of a mad question to ask someone who's an expert on Scottish travel and stuff, but where is your favourite place to go and travel to and eat outside of Scotland? If you once we're all allowed to go abroad again.
Right. I knew that you were going to ask me that, so it makes it a little easier. But I'm gonna add a bit more.
Okay.
One place I absolutely love is Thailand. We went a few years ago, and that was fantastic. And again, luckily our trip coincided with the Chinese Vegetarian Festival. So there was lots of vegan food everywhere, and it was very easy to find it. But the destination I chose is one of those places that is really dear to my heart. I've been twice now, once as a vegan, and I would go back in a heartbeat. Although, of course, right now that's not possible, and maybe also not too. I don't want to necessarily go there right now for a variety of reasons. But it's LA in California. Los Angeles has a fantastic vegan food scene. We went last September for 2 weeks, and I don't even know how we ate all of this, but we just tried everything we could find, from food markets and kind of hole-in-the-wall food trucks and food windows to, the vegan food scene there, the different vegan restaurants, the kind of popular and famous restaurants in LA. We tried all of it, from $5 for a taco to, a fancy, I think the fanciest dinner I've ever had in my life, with the best vegan carbonara. I thought I'm going to fall off my chair. It was so delicious. So yeah, LA is one of my favorite places to travel, especially for vegan food.
That sounds amazing. Okay, and just to sort of finish off, so what's the best piece of advice you could give to a vegan wanting to travel within the UK, and the best piece of advice for vegans that want to travel abroad? Right.
So there is really one piece of advice that is for everyone, and that is do your research. In the UK particularly, and in Scotland particularly, I think it's all about using Happy Cow, for example, as an app, but also going onto those vegan food blogs, those vegan travel blogs, and just Googling around to find the vegan restaurants and the vegan friendly restaurants, because even if it seems rural and remote, they are there. And there's places all over the country where you can find fantastic vegan food, and you wouldn't even expect it in those remote places. Islands, for example, where I never thought I'd find any vegan food. I thought I'm going to live off hummus and bread, and chips. But you can find vegan food everywhere. So doing your research for Scotland particularly, and finding those vegan websites that summarize all of that. And in terms of international travel, again, researching, finding those blogs by people who've been recently there, and can tell you a bit about which restaurants might be vegan friendly, but also thinking about the local cuisine and researching which local dishes might be surprisingly vegan by default or can be easily veganized. How do you order in a restaurant? What's the words and the language you need to use to make yourself understood and make sure that it's all animal product free? So research is the one big thing, but then figuring out how to adjust that to the local kind of context and surroundings, and not being afraid to go to a country where people say, oh, there's no vegan food, because there always is something. And sometimes you might just even eat something even more local than all the tourists. So that's a good way to look at it.
That sounds awesome. That's great advice. Thank you. And where can people find more of your work?
So people can find me online, like you said, WatchMeSee.com and GlasgowVeganGuide.com. I'm very active on Instagram as well. More with WatchMeSee at the moment, because we're still not eating out in restaurants so much here, and home-ordered food just never looks quite as... Also, I forget to take pictures. But yeah, on Instagram, Facebook, you can find me on Twitter as well, but Instagram is probably your best chance. And yeah, feel free to reach out and ask questions about vegan food in Scotland as well.
Amazing. Right. Well, thanks so much for coming by. I'm so glad we managed to get you into the studio, because I was really keen to talk to you. If we hadn't, you'd have been on the next episode. There would have been no doubt about that. But we got it done today, and that's the main thing. So thanks so much for coming by. No worries. See you later, Kathi. Bye. Okay, so that brings us to the end today. Thank you very much to our guests. Thanks to Jack, thanks to Romy, and thanks to Kathi for coming by. Our next episode is on the 18th of September, and we'll be announcing the guests within the next few days. But it's going to be another 2 interviews and another cook along. That's the way we're doing things now. So until then, stay safe, everyone. See you soon.